Welcome to the Refinitiv Sustainability Perspectives podcast, where our goal is to engage and inform our audience, from investors to asset managers and portfolio managers, to sustainability leaders and those involved in ESG and sustainable finance. This is Kisa Shreen. As we are approaching the end of 2020, what a year, right? It's time to summarize the main trends that will shape the ESG agenda in the coming weeks, months, and year. Here with us to discuss this is Dr. Barnabas Acs, Refinitiv's Global Business Director for Sustainable Finance. Barney, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great being here again.
So we know that the UK has started vaccinations with Pfizer, followed by the US on December 14th. And there are many conversations that are revolving around the economic severity of COVID-19 and the recovery, and especially green recovery plans. So Barney, what are the economic implications of COVID-19, and what are the main plans that different countries are looking to adopt now?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you very much. Beware, numbers are coming. The world's GDP has contracted with about 4.4%. This is 2.6 times more than during the financial crisis back in 2009. The Eurozone contracted with 8.3%, which is again 2 times more serious than it was during the financial crisis. And the US has been hit on the economy a little bit less severely because that contraction was about 4.3%, which is 1.7 point more severe than it was in 2009. In the unemployment figures, what we are seeing is that, the Eurozone unemployment rose to 8%. That's actually a similar rate of change to what happened back in the financial crisis era. We see, compared to the GDP numbers, quite a serious hit in the US markets, where unemployment basically rose to 8.9% from 3.8%, nearly twice as serious as back then on those days. So I think what this means from an economic perspective, we all remember 2009, I believe, when everything was very seriously hit, is that COVID created a new sort of reset. It's not just a leap back. You can't really afford to do the old things. The school closures during the pandemic could set back human capital accumulation severely as well. In addition to recovering from near-term recessions, policymakers have to address things like the things that we have discussed earlier, the long-term resilience, the equitable growth, and further pile-up of debt. So investments in health, education, and high-return infrastructure projects are really the way into the future. There is no point in, heavily investing in fossil anymore if you know that it's going to become a stranded asset anyway, and it will go and add to your indebtedness and risk as a country. So hence why we are hearing the very positive news coming from actually all countries around the globe about New Deal communications. Top of the list is, of course, the UK with COP26 on the horizon. The UK has made a 350 million green recovery budget. And they will also issue first green bonds in 2021. And adding to that, they have also communicated a 12 billion 10-point plan to net zero transition, which includes offshore wind, hydrogen, setting nuclear's exact role, advancements in electric vehicles, more focus on public transportation, carbon capture and storage facilities, innovation in finance.
So Barney, this is great. I love the direction here. If you could look at these, go country by country, if we look at just like maybe the top 5 and think about what this reset, as you phrase it, means for the investment community. And then from that point, take us through some of the big ideas and the big movements and initiatives that each country has. That would be a great way to approach it. So could we go maybe country by country, just spend a minute or two looking at the top 5?
Yeah, the EU Next Generation EU Recovery Fund of 750 billion is known to everybody. That will basically require member states to allocate 30% of the grants to sustainable investments. So that's very significant amount of money. The Biden administration in the US has committed to the Green New Deal, which of course has the 5 pillars, which is in his communication of the campaign. What's really to be called out there, adding to the similarities to the UK approach, is that they really do have shown commitments to the old industry communities like coal. So there is a communication of not leaving anybody behind. There is, of course, a serious commitment into infrastructure that also tackles climate change and mitigates the effects there. China, we didn't really have the chance to discuss last time, but that was around the time we last talked, when China made a pledge to make sure that emissions peak before 2030, and then that they reach net zero by 2060. Lately, the new prime minister in Japan, Mr. Suga, has committed the country to become carbon neutral by 2050, and he's encouraging investments into green and digital technologies. In India, Prime Minister Modi sees infrastructure investment as a key driving force. Of course, he also talked about a national hydrogen energy mission that is kind of new and thrown into the mix. So the countries are active in making commitments to the new era.
And so if we look at countries, for example, if we look at China and people's concern because of just China's positioning as an emissions emitter, and if we look at the U.S. based on where the U.S. has been over the last few years, they're back in the Paris Agreement now, but obviously there was not a lot of focus. What would make the investment community really understand and be optimistic about where these specific countries are going in the near term compared to what we've seen from them historically?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question. I think although the reasons might be different, I think the direction is quite given. In the case of the UK, I believe, especially around Brexit, you would need a new set of communications that really points to the future and helps planning toward the next generation and towards 2050, and that's the way forward. In Europe, who have always been committed to the sustainability goals, it will be very interesting to see all the regulations coming into play in the first part of 2020s and all the lessons learned there. We know that China raises a lot of questions, of course. Talking to Sean Kidney at Climate Bonds Initiative, the very important comment that he made to me when I asked things about this was that China never commits to things that they think they cannot achieve. So that's their commitment is a pledge on its own. India is a great question because that's where we see the least of concrete initiatives. We see that renewable energy is getting into the forefront of attention. Prime Minister Modi mentioned that sector would need $20 billion in a year, so in every year to get the capacities developed, and also says that 20 billion is actually in kind of perspective because the last couple of years have seen huge investments in north of $60 billion into that sectors. Whereas details are to be seen in India's and China's case, I think we have a good grounding and a good story there. In the case of China, the other important question is, of course, how do they use the Belt and Road Initiative? Yes. And how do they outsource coal, which is the biggest fear? I think the number that I read somewhere is that there is 100 gigawatts of coal capacities in construction at the moment and 150 under planning. So obviously that has to be handled, and we will have to see how that's being handled and how those things are phased out.
Barney, is it Accurate to say that new technology will have a role here? I mean, we're talking about coal, we're talking about how each of these governments, economies, countries will be handling and moving toward the green recovery. What role will technology play? Will it be, do you see it breaking down by country? Do you see it breaking down by sector? What role will tech play, and how can the initiatives be brought out and explored through technology?
Very good question. And as you have seen, maybe, or hopefully it transpired from my earlier comments, is that hydrogen is actually playing quite an increasing role in this whole mix. Batteries are not really fit for all the purposes that the intermittentness, the renewable energy sources are providing. So hydrogen is actually quite a good transition source of energy. First of all, because it burns, and it's a very good thing that it burns, because it also can transit fossil fuel heavy industries in a cleaner way. And of course, it is also good for storing energy and that being transported. The only problem with hydrogen is that most of it is currently generated in a sort of a gray form. There are many colors. The gray means that basically it's steam reformation using either natural gas, or if it's brown, coal. In order for hydrogen to become the sort of the fuel of the future, what has to happen is at least a blue hydrogen generation, which is the gray with added carbon capture mechanisms, or ideally the green one, where you generate the renewable energy, use electrolysis of water, and then basically create hydrogen in a green way. And that's the sort of the ultimate technology that we want to reach. That would help us to reach those net zero targets that are spreading between 2040 and 2060, different commitments from different countries.
Now, finally, let's look at regulation. We are talking a lot about, again, looking at the countries separately. And we know from a regulatory standpoint, some countries appear to be more advanced than others in terms of the regulations that they have. If we look at the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation Level 2, we know that got pushed back to 2022. What do you see, Barney, as being on the forefront in terms of regulations coming in the near term? Which countries do you feel are going to be on the forefront, and what impact will that have for investors?
Of course, the SFDR level 2 has been delayed, but it's very important to mention that level 1, which is actually mandating the financial services sector participants, including fund managers and financial advisors, to report on different ESG metrics, is going to stay in place. So these institutions will have to report on the ESG side of things come March 2021. It's just they don't have to report based on the 50 metrics that is in the technical standards. So it's a very important message that it's not really a delay. It's a delayed in details, but the activity has to be there. And of course, it creates a interesting situations, how different market participants are going to go by and comply with these regulations. We, of course, are in very advanced stages as a company to provide services to this. We have been very active in the market ourselves as well. We will see how it will play out, but it's very important to remind everybody that this is not a delayed regulation. Only the details are sort of delayed. In the States, of course, a lot will depend on the January Georgia elections outcome about the Senate. That will also determine what kind of tools the Biden administration will have at their hands. This has been discussed a few times also on our podcast, so I wouldn't go into detail in there. But these are the sort of two main markets where regulatory framework is going to have a major role. And of course, both investment managers and financial market participants and both the companies have to be bracing for this kind of new era. You will have to turn more sustainable, have plans for a carbon pathway that is reducing your footprint. You will have to be able to report more, and the list goes on. So welcome to the new era in 2021. I think that's the message.
And speaking of the new era, do you see mergers going on between some of these regulatory bodies or some of the bodies that create the frameworks? Do you think that's a part of the 2021 era?
Yeah, this is very interesting, and it's also interesting that it's running very fast, or it's going ahead quite fast. The International Integrated Reporting Council (IRCR) and SASB, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, have announced their intention to merge into a unified organization, Value Reporting Foundation, their name would be. This is also coming just a few weeks after an announcement that basically CDP, CDSB, GRI, IRC, and SASB made together that they are committed to work together to sort of create a aligned approach on reporting. As you know, we have discussed this, I think, in our first conversation, how difficult it is for companies to report and adhere to all these kind of frameworks that are out there. And it's actually very good to see that there is this common language arising and the need arising, and actually there are steps towards this common requirement that to have some more unified and aligned view on sustainable finance and sustainable investing data.
Great information, Barney. First of all, economic contraction across many countries seem to be more severe now with the pandemic than even with the financial crises from over 10 years ago. One of the primary differences we called out is the pandemic is really leading to a substantial reset around resilience, around equitable growth. And there is lots of interest in investing in health and education. Overall, more governments are showing commitments to sustainable finance efforts, and the tech will have a huge role, technology that is, will have a huge role in the green recovery. You pointed out hydrogen representing a good transition source of energy. One of the key questions that we'll all be asking ourselves is how will market participants comply with new regulations? And one thing that we are looking forward to in 2021, among things that we're looking forward to in 2021, is welcoming greater alignment around reporting. Dr. Barnabas Acs, thank you so much for joining us.
We invite you to subscribe to the Refinitiv Sustainability Perspectives podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your content. What did you think about the podcast? Leave us a review on iTunes or follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for updates on our show. You can even check us out on YouTube now. Thank you for joining. See you next time.